Betrayal, temptation, and trust, a Reddit-style relationship story. The things we pretend not to see. I used to think jealousy was proof of love. If you didn't care, you wouldn't get jealous, right? That's what I told myself, until it nearly burned everything down. My name's Aaron. I'm 33, born and raised in Chicago, and until last year I thought I had the kind of relationship you only see in ads for engagement rings. Emma and I met 6 years ago at a friend's rooftop party in the West Loop. She was the one making everyone laugh, holding a glass of cheap rose like it was fine wine. I was the quiet guy by the grill who didn't know half the crowd. She walked up, said, "You look like you need a friend," and that was it. We moved in together after 10 months. The pace felt fast, but we fit easily. Same sense of humor, same ambition. She worked in marketing, I was a software consultant. The city was noisy, expensive, alive. Our apartment overlooked the Brown Line, and we joked that we couldn't tell if the rumbling at night was the train or our upstairs neighbors fighting again. Everything was fine, good, even, until subtle changes started creeping in. Not big things, just the kind of moments you could explain away if you wanted to. She'd start keeping her phone face down on the table. When I'd walk into the room, she'd swipe out of a chat a little too quickly. I told myself it was work stuff. Marketing people have endless Slack messages, right? But then came the laughter, soft, private, not meant for me. The kind you make when you text someone who knows exactly how to make you blush through a screen. I noticed, but I said nothing. Because noticing meant confronting, and confronting meant maybe losing her. So I pretended not to see. It got worse in small, domestic ways. She started dressing nicer for client lunches. Perfume I hadn't smelled in months. Late evenings, finishing reports. And yet, when she was home, she still kissed me goodnight, still curled up next to me during Netflix marathons. That mix of affection and distance was poison. It kept hope alive, while something else died quietly underneath. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was just insecure. Maybe she was allowed a life outside us. Every article online said, "Trust is key." Reddit threads full of self-righteous advice echoed in my head. Don't snoop, or you're the problem. So I didn't snoop. But I watched. There's a strange power in silent observation. You start cataloging micro-expressions, tone shifts, schedule changes. One night she laughed at a meme on her phone, then looked guilty when I asked what was funny. She said, "Oh, just a coworker thing." I smiled, nodded, went back to my laptop. But inside I felt that specific, hollow heat that jealousy brings, the kind that eats from the inside while leaving your face calm. The breaking point came on a Thursday. She said she was having dinner with her team after work. I offered to pick her up. She declined, said it'd be late. Around 9, rain started. I stared at the clock until 11, then 12. No messages. Finally, at 12:37 a.m., a text. "Sorry babe, running late. Heading home soon, red heart." I fell asleep on the couch, phone in hand. At 2 a.m., the door opened. She froze when she saw me awake. Hair slightly messy, lipstick faded, faint smell of whiskey, and something woody, not her usual perfume. "Rough night?" I asked. "Yeah, long meeting after drinks." That was her story. She went straight to the shower. I stared at the couch fabric pattern until I memorized it, because if I looked at her, I'd ask questions I wasn't ready to hear answered. The next morning, guilt hit her, or maybe just the memory of being watched. She was overly kind, made breakfast, kissed me goodbye 3 times. For the first time in months, I checked her phone when she showered. No obvious texts. But there was a contact named Aaron, client. Messages deleted. Call logs gone. Only one photo in her gallery I hadn't seen before, a blurry shot of a whiskey glass on a restaurant table, opposite side empty. Timestamp matched Thursday night. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because part of me still needed to know whether the pain I felt was justified or self-inflicted. If I accused her and was wrong, I'd be the villain. So I did what most cowards do. I collected evidence instead of truth. Over the next week, I noticed she locked her phone with a new passcode. She muted notifications. She smiled at random times while typing, then sighed afterward like something bittersweet just happened. I started losing sleep. Work slipped. Friends asked if I was okay. I said I was just tired. The truth was I was living in 2 realities, the one where my girlfriend loved me and the one where she didn't. Every new clue shifted gravity between them. By the second Friday, I cracked. She left her laptop open on the counter while showering. I shouldn't have, but I looked. Chrome history. Maple in Maine, Chicago. It's a quiet, upscale bar near the river. She'd told me her client meeting last week was at a steakhouse across town. I scrolled further. Calendar invite, private event. Shared with someone labeled D. No surname. My stomach dropped. When she came out, hair damp, towel around her shoulders, I was still staring at the screen. "Aaron," she asked, half amused, half worried. "What are you doing?" "Looking for something," I said. She froze when she saw what was open. Her mouth parted slightly, like she was about to lie, but realized it would be pointless. Then she said the line that still rings in my ears. "It's not what you think." Of course, it was exactly what I thought. That night was the first argument we ever had that didn't end in resolution. She admitted there was a guy, Daniel, from another department. They'd been working on a campaign together, got close, crossed a line once. Her words, once. She said it like minimizing the frequency would minimize the betrayal. I didn't yell. I just asked why. She said she didn't know. That it just happened. That she missed feeling wanted. That I'd been distant. The list was endless, and maybe some of it was true. But in that moment, all I could hear was the shattering sound of the version of us I believed in. She cried. I didn't. Something inside me had gone quiet, like a circuit flipped. She begged me to forgive her, said it was a mistake, said she ended it. I told her I needed time. That's the polite way of saying I don't trust myself not to leave right now. The next week was silence. We lived together but apart. Two ghosts orbiting the same rooms. She tried to act normal. I withdrew further. I checked her phone again. No new messages. Maybe she really had stopped. Or maybe she got smarter about hiding it. One night, she placed her phone on the table, screen unlocked, and said, "Go ahead. Look." I didn't. Because at that point, the issue wasn't proof, it was belief. Trust doesn't regenerate on command. Instead, I asked her if she loved him. She said no. I asked if she loved me. She hesitated. That hesitation was my answer. I moved into a short-term rental 2 weeks later. My friends called her names. My mother said I should have seen it coming. Reddit would have called her a cheater, me a doormat, and the story would have ended there. But life's not a thread with neat upvotes and moral clarity. Because here's the thing, I did see it coming. I saw it months before it happened, in every small distance I ignored. And I let it happen because facing truth felt worse than suspicion. I built the trap and walked into it myself. That realization hurt more than the betrayal. Now, months later, I still replay those nights. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted, if I should have tried harder. Then I remember the smell of whiskey at 2 a.m., the way her laughter changed tone when she talked to him. Small things, but they form a mosaic that only looks complete in hindsight. People online love tidy endings. Dump her. Move on. Never look back. Real life is quieter. You still miss them sometimes. You still check your phone before you realize there's nothing left to check. If there's any moral, it's this. Jealousy isn't proof of love, it's proof of fear. And pretending not to see the cracks doesn't keep a relationship whole. It just lets the rot spread quietly until one day you wake up and realize the foundation's gone. Continuation. The weeks after meeting Leah were like walking a tightrope. Each step forward felt exhilarating, but I could feel the ghosts of the past tugging at my ankles. Emma lingered in my mind, not as an active presence, but as a set of questions I couldn't answer. Did I still love her? Could I forgive her fully? Or was I just finding comfort in a safer, quieter alternative? Leah didn't push. She understood boundaries, patience, and the silent war I fought with myself every day. We talked about trivial things at first, favorite movies, coffee orders, and the architecture of the city, but slowly, deeper conversations emerged. I told her about my childhood in Chicago, the quirks of my family, and eventually, about Emma, though carefully, sparingly. She listened without judgment. That was the difference. No assumptions, no anger, no immediate moral conclusions. Just a presence that made me feel seen without being exposed. But the city has a way of testing you when you least expect it. One rainy evening, as Leah and I were leaving a jazz bar in River North, I saw Emma again. This time, she wasn't alone. She was with someone, a man whose face I didn't recognize. They laughed, their heads close, oblivious to the chaos they had left behind. My chest tightened, and I felt a rush of old emotions. Anger, longing, grief, jealousy, all bundled into one tight knot. Leah noticed my sudden silence and squeezed my hand. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Over the next days, I noticed subtle changes in myself. I started analyzing every interaction with Leah, comparing it subconsciously to moments with Emma. Was I being fair to Leah? Or was I holding onto a phantom? Sometimes, late at night, I'd replay scenes from my apartment with Emma, the smell of her shampoo, the curve of her smile, the way her laughter shifted depending on her mood. One night, I dreamed of her. She was smiling, but the smile was directed at someone else. I woke up gasping, heart pounding, a mixture of longing and fear running through me. I couldn't tell if it was guilt for still thinking about her or relief that she was no longer part of my life. Leah became aware of my distance. One evening, she asked me to meet her at a quiet cafe near Millennium Park. She had the kind of patient expression that could soften even the hardest moments. "Aaron," she said, placing her hands over mine, "I know something's still here." She gestured toward my chest. "You're carrying her." I wanted to deny it, to insist I was ready to move on. But the truth is that I wasn't. Not fully. "I don't know how to stop thinking about her," I admitted. "Even when I'm with you, she's there. And I feel guilty for that." She nodded. "That's normal. It doesn't mean you're not trying. It doesn't mean you don't care about me. But you have to be honest with yourself and with me." It was one of the few moments I felt completely exposed without fear of judgment. I realized then that relationships aren't just about love or attraction. They're about trust, patience, and navigating the messy, gray areas of human emotion. Work, of course, offered a convenient escape. My projects consumed my attention, but they also mirrored my own inner conflicts. Lines of code, deadlines, meetings, they were predictable, logical, and solvable. Life outside my apartment rarely offered such clarity. Still, weekends with Leah began to feel real. We explored the city, visited art exhibits, and even took a spontaneous drive to the suburbs. She had a way of asking questions that made me reflect, without accusing or probing. One evening, sitting on the balcony of her apartment overlooking the Chicago River, she asked, "Do you ever regret it, leaving her?" I paused, looking at the water. The reflection of city lights shimmered like broken glass. "I don't know," I admitted. I regret letting it get to the point where trust didn't feel possible. But I don't regret leaving." She nodded silently, and for a moment, everything felt still, like a rare pause in a life full of constant tension. But life rarely offers stillness for long. Emma appeared again, unexpectedly, at a networking event I had agreed to attend with Leah. She didn't see me at first. When our eyes met across the crowded room, the past slammed into the present like a freight train. I felt a cold rush of recognition, a mixture of anger, longing, and curiosity. Leah noticed my gaze, but didn't ask immediately. Instead, she followed my eyes and nodded slightly, giving me the choice to handle it as I saw fit. I approached Emma cautiously, our conversation polite, almost formal. She apologized again, briefly, for the past. I nodded. Inside, I felt a strange sense of closure, mixed with residual ache. Returning to Leah afterward, I realized how much patience she had shown and how unfair it would have been to let the past dictate the present. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice steady but concerned. "Yes," I said, and for the first time, I meant it. It wasn't the absence of pain that made it real, it was the acceptance of it. I couldn't erase Emma or what happened, but I could choose how to move forward. Over the following months, Leah and I built a tentative trust. I learned to be honest, even when honesty was uncomfortable. I confessed old feelings, admitted moments of doubt, and she listened without judgment. Our connection deepened, not despite the shadows of my past, but because we acknowledged them together. One night, she said something that stayed with me. "You're human, Aaron. You'll carry ghosts. The question is whether you let them live in the same room as us." I realized then that she wasn't asking me to forget Emma or the hurt she caused. She was asking me to stop letting it control my present. And for the first time, I felt like I could. Healing, I learned, isn't linear. It's messy, full of doubt, detours, and occasional regressions. Some days, a memory would resurface, a smell, a laugh, a place, and I'd feel a pang of grief or anger. But the difference now was choice. I could acknowledge the memory without letting it dictate my actions. Leah became not just a partner, but a mirror, reflecting the best and worst of me. She demanded patience, honesty, and vulnerability, the same qualities I had failed to cultivate before. The moral, I began to understand, wasn't about who was right or wrong. It wasn't about guilt or vengeance. It was about self-awareness, responsibility, and the courage to continue living, even when the past pressed hard against the present. Looking back now, I can see the sequence clearly: subtle changes, small betrayals, the creeping suspicion, the confrontation, the aftermath, and the tentative steps towards something new. It wasn't neat. It wasn't pretty. It didn't fit into any narrative of good versus evil. Life rarely does. I still carry echoes of Emma. I still sometimes question my actions. But I have also learned to recognize what is mine to carry and what I must release. Love, trust, betrayal, they aren't stories with neat endings. They're lessons we live, often painfully, before understanding them fully. And Leah? She taught me that the present is the only place where real love exists. The past is a teacher, not a jailer. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel capable of facing it, with honesty, courage, and someone who chooses to walk beside me despite my shadows. Crossroads of desire and doubt. Spring arrived in Chicago like a reminder that life never stops moving. The streets buzzed with tourists, the river reflected sunlight like shattered glass, and every corner seemed alive with possibility. For Leah and me, those months felt like a tentative truce with the past, a fragile experiment in trust. Yet trust is a fragile thing. You can nurture it, water it, tend to it carefully, but it always sits on a precipice, ready to topple at the slightest tremor. That tremor came not from Emma, but from myself. I found myself questioning everything about my capacity for love. Each time Leah laughed, each time she leaned into me during a quiet conversation, I felt a pang of undeserved joy. My mind whispered, "You don't deserve this. You're broken. What if you fail again?" I tried to ignore it, focusing on work and our weekends. We explored Lincoln Park, watched street performers, sampled new coffee shops, and spent nights on her balcony watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. But every minor disagreement between us became a flashpoint. A missed text, a delayed response, a neutral tone in her voice. Suddenly, my imagination painted them as signals of something sinister. One evening, Leah mentioned an old college friend moving back to Chicago. She wanted to invite him for dinner. My chest tightened immediately. I didn't even know him, yet I imagined him as a threat. Rationally, I knew she wasn't interested in him that way, but jealousy doesn't obey reason. "I don't know," I said reluctantly. "Why?" she asked, tilting her head. "Nothing," I muttered, but my silence said otherwise. She didn't push, but I could feel her disappointment, subtle, patient, but unmistakable. That same week, work introduced a new complication. A female client, sharp and assertive, started collaborating closely with me on a major project. She was professional, but her style mirrored qualities I hadn't noticed I craved in someone: confidence, wit, subtle humor. Our interactions were always professional, yet I caught myself replaying our conversations in my head, analyzing laughter, tone, gestures. I realized I was projecting, creating an emotional affair in my mind without her even knowing. The guilt gnawed at me, not just for Emma, not just for Leah, but for the idea that I could let my mind wander into places it shouldn't. One night, Leah and I had a minor disagreement about our weekend plans. I overreacted, snapping at her over something trivial. She stayed calm, as always, and I immediately felt ashamed. "I'm sorry," I said after a moment of silence. "I don't know why I'm like this." "You're human," she replied. "But you need to understand what's yours to manage and what isn't." Her patience was a mirror I sometimes hated because it reflected the parts of me I didn't like. I wanted to be a man who could trust fully, who didn't carry ghosts, who didn't feel the constant pull of what-ifs. Emma appeared again, not in person, but in my thoughts. A mutual friend mentioned she was dating someone new, stable, maybe boring. I felt relief first, then a subtle pang of envy. She had moved on, it seemed, and I was still navigating the shadows of my past mistakes. I realized that closure isn't a single moment. It's a slow process of internal negotiation. I couldn't erase what happened, but I could negotiate my response to it. Leah and I grew closer, slowly, with shared vulnerability and honesty. She asked about my fears, my insecurities, my regrets. I shared them, little by little. I admitted my lingering thoughts of Emma, my doubts, my moments of weakness. She never judged, never lectured. She merely listened, sometimes offering insight, sometimes just holding space. Her patience, however, did not eliminate challenges. One evening, during a gallery opening, a mutual friend of hers complimented my work, then jokingly suggested I should date someone more fun, more unpredictable. I laughed politely, but the comment lingered in my mind. Was I safe? Predictable? Was I truly present, or still haunted by my past? Leah noticed my withdrawal and asked directly, "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" "Yes," I admitted, voice low. "Not all the time. Not in ways that matter. But she's part of my past I can't ignore." She nodded slowly. "Then let's talk about it. Not to erase her, not to shame you, but to understand what part of you is still entangled." For the first time, we spoke openly about Emma. Not accusations, not blame, just acknowledgement. It was exhausting, emotionally, but necessary. And after that night, I felt a subtle shift. Acknowledgement was different from obsession. But life tests lessons learned. One evening, after a late dinner with Leah, I received a text from my female client. "Do you want to grab a drink to celebrate the project milestone?" I froze. The temptation wasn't about her specifically. It was about curiosity, validation, the thrill of being seen outside my relationship. I stared at the phone, torn between honesty and desire. I showed Leah the message. "Do you want to go?" she asked calmly, not accusing, just observing. "No," I said immediately. "I'm not. I can't." Her hand found mine. "Good. But I want you to understand why you felt tempted. It's not the act, it's the awareness. That's what we work with." And that was the lesson. Morality isn't always about right and wrong in action, but awareness, choice, and courage to act in alignment with values. Weeks later, I found myself reflecting on the chain of events that brought me here. Emma's betrayal, my jealousy, the slow healing with Leah, the daily struggle with temptation and doubt. I realized life isn't a narrative with heroes and villains. It's a network of choices, consequences, and moments where integrity is tested, often quietly, internally. I wrote in my journal one night, "I am learning that love is not ownership. Trust is not passive. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Healing is ongoing. And the past, no matter how vivid, only has the power we give it." Leah read over my shoulder. "That's insightful," she said. I smiled, realizing she understood that growth isn't always dramatic, but it's real when acknowledged. By summer, the city had changed. Festivals, outdoor concerts, and river walks marked the season. Leah and I moved into a slightly larger apartment together, small but bright, a new foundation built carefully on honesty and awareness. Emma appeared only occasionally in thoughts, never in person. The emotional echoes were fading, replaced by active presence, care, and the subtle thrill of a relationship built on mutual patience and respect. Yet I knew I'd never fully escape the lessons of betrayal, jealousy, and moral ambiguity. They shaped me, warned me, and demanded vigilance. And that was the final insight of part 3. Love isn't about perfection. It's about navigating complexity, acknowledging flaws, choosing patience, and building trust consciously, one deliberate step at a time. Fault lines and quiet truths. I learned early on that betrayals don't always come with fireworks. Most of them arrive as tiny tremors. They begin as a hairline crack you ignore until one day the floor gives way. After we moved into the slightly larger apartment, life with Leah settled into a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Groceries on Sundays. Work calls muted during dinner. She had a way of arranging our small space so it felt lived in, not staged. I liked that. I liked her. And yet, beneath the surface of those humane routines, something in me remained tense, like a muscle that doesn't relax after an injury. The city was a constant. Sirens, street vendors, the rumble of trains. It was also a place of second chances. I kept telling myself that moving forward meant accepting the past and not letting it dictate my present. But acceptance is not a single act. It is repeated many times in small acts of honesty and courage. One night, late in October, Sam from work called. "Fancy dinner?" he said. "Board wants to celebrate the rollout. It's at Maple in Maine." The name made me flinch. I didn't mention why. "I'm busy," I said. I lied. The truth was a bit more complicated. Maple in Maine had been the place Emma told me she'd been meeting clients. It was also where I had first suspected something. Going back there felt like poking at an old wound. But avoidance had its costs. I realized that by refusing to revisit places that hurt, I was giving them power. So I went. The bar was dim, wood-heavy, and smelled faintly of citrus and old bourbon. People laughed and touched knees across small tables. I kept my hands mostly on my drink. Then I saw her, not Emma, but a woman who moved with the same easy confidence. For a split second my chest tightened, then relaxed. It wasn't her. Still, the venue felt like a stage that held ghosts. Sam spotted me from across the room and waved me over. Conversation started with work and slid into less important things. That, too, is healing. The ability to talk about nothing and not have it swallow you. On the way home, I thought about why I'd gone. Not to challenge fate or prove anything. I went because I needed to be okay in spaces that used to hurt. I needed to survive the memory without surrendering to it. A week later, Leah told me she'd been asked to lead a regional campaign. It was a promotion, and a promotion meant more travel, later nights, and a spotlight she'd worked hard to earn. I was proud. I was also afraid. What if you meet someone on the road? I blurted before I could stop myself. She blinked, taken aback. Are we really doing this? Her question was fair. It forced me to examine whether my fear was reasonable or rooted in old wounds. It also showed me the difference between protection and control. Loving someone doesn't mean preventing them from living their life. I don't want to be the person who limits you, I said. I want to be the person you come back to. She smiled then, but it wasn't the same as the easy grin she wore on our first dates. Her expression was gentle, patient, and a little weary. Promises are small things, she said. Actions matter more. We had a tacit agreement then. She would pursue her career, and I would work on my trust. It sounded simple. It wasn't. The first trip took her to Boston. Her texts were frequent, almost giddy, full of specifics about meetings and food trucks. I read them, then reread them until some of the warmth had drained away. The mind is a greedy thing. It will take any hint of joy and spin it into suspicion if given half a chance. On the third day, I received a picture, her at a rooftop dinner, city lights behind her, a man beside her whose face I couldn't see clearly. The caption read, "Celebrating a big win. Team did great." My first reaction was bile. My second was logic. Who had time to fabricate an entire life for a single photo? But emotion doesn't listen to reason. I texted her, "Who's the guy?" The reply came quickly. "Oh, that's Marcus. He's on the copy team. He helped close the account. Mostly a work thing." I forced myself to breathe. The text should have settled me. But the old itch of suspicion returned, like a tooth that aches regardless of how much you rinse your mouth. When she came back, the apartment smelled like the hotel and a perfumed soap I didn't recognize. She hugged me tightly in the kitchen and then, as if sensing my silence, asked if I wanted to talk. "I saw the photo," I said. "It was a work dinner," she replied. "Marcus is married. He's a family guy. We took a team photo. I thought it would be obvious." Her face was honest, her voice steady, and yet I couldn't stop wondering why I felt threatened by a married colleague. "Do you trust me?" she asked quietly. The question cut deeper than any accusation could. It revealed that my doubts were no longer about her actions, but about my internal capacity to trust. I said yes, because I wanted to be honest. I also knew I wasn't always truthful to myself. Days later, we went to a small show in Logan Square. A local band played cover songs in a low-lit bar. We sat near the stage, hands twined. Mid-set, a woman waved from the bar. She was older, confident, a little theatrical. She strode over, laughing, and hugged Leah like an old friend. "Leah," she exclaimed, "you've got to meet Lila. Lila, this is my roommate's boyfriend, Aaron." Lila's handshake was firm. Her eyes were sharp and amused. I felt a flicker of something, not jealousy this time, but curiosity, a small alert that made me hyper-aware of my manners, my laugh, the way I held my drink. Lila clapped during the chorus and sang off-key with everyone. She was magnetic in a way that made people orbit her. After the show, as we walked to the L, Leah whispered, "She's complicated. She's going through something. She's the kind of person who draws a lot of attention." "I like attention," I lied. "I like calm." Leah laughed softly. "You always say that." Later that night, I found myself awake at 3 a.m., thinking about Lila. It was absurd. What did she have to do with my life? Nothing, logically. But my mind was an old map with landmarks of betrayal. Any new person felt like a potential fault line. Weeks passed. Lila surfaced in social gatherings. She was dramatic, flirty, but affectionate in a way that felt public, not intimate. I felt a prick of jealousy when Leah told me about Lila's loud laugh and how she'd leaned into her at a crowded table. I decided, consciously, to name my feeling instead of letting it grow like mold. I told Leah how small actions made me anxious and why. She listened, nodded, and explained her friendships. She didn't stop seeing Lila. She didn't need to. Her friendships were hers. "Friends are mirrors," she said once, reaching for my hand. "They show you parts of yourself. Lila shows me the messy, brave side. You don't have to be her. You just have to be honest." Her words were soft, not dismissive. They asked me to change my relationship with discomfort rather than change her life to soothe it. Change requires a decision. I decided to see a therapist. The first session was awkward. I sat on a couch and recited what I thought I should feel: anger, betrayal, grief. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Patel, asked me to do something different. "When did you first feel like you needed to control someone to feel safe?" I traced the memories back to childhood. My father, who controlled everything to keep a fragile order: finances, schedules, even what guests could say at the dinner table. Perhaps I inherited a reflex: control equals safety. The therapist didn't nod in a way that made me feel judged. She just held the space and named patterns I'd been blind to. Therapy didn't fix me overnight. It introduced me to slow work, recognizing triggers, breathing into them, choosing a different response. When Leah was away, I practiced those practices. When Lila's laugh bubbled up in a conversation, I checked myself and asked, was I reacting to her or to my past? One night, months later, Emma texted me. The message was simple: "Can we talk? I owe you an honest conversation." My heart stuttered. The past was not done with me. I stared at the message long enough for the room to grow dark. I thought of all the small exercises I had done since then: naming feelings, sitting with discomfort, leaning into honesty. Those practices had shifted my baseline. I didn't jump. I paused. I texted, "Where?" She replied with a cafe in the West Loop. I told Leah the truth. She didn't ask for details. She only asked if we should go together. "No," I said. "I think I should go alone." She nodded. "Okay, trust yourself." The appointment with Emma felt like stepping into a museum of my past. She arrived late, hair tucked into a scarf, eyes ringed with tiredness. We sat across from each other in cafe light that felt too bright. There was a history between us that no casual conversation could erase. "I wanted to explain," she said immediately before coffee arrived. "Not to excuse what I did, but to explain why. Maybe it will help both of us move on." Her voice was low, earnest. She spoke about pressure at work, a moment of weakness with Daniel that led to more than a moment. She spoke of shame and how it metastasized into a pattern she'd barely recognized. She apologized, fully, without qualifying language. I listened. At times, I felt anger bubble up like a heat wave. At others, I felt a strange compassion. She had hurt me, yes. She had also, in her own messy way, been hurting. When she left, she pressed my hand lightly. "I don't expect anything," she said. "I only wanted to be honest." Walking home, I felt strange clarity. I had sought closure for months in cafes, in texts, in new love. The talk with Emma wasn't the neat seal of closure I imagined, but it was a step. Her honesty was an offering she hadn't given before. I came back to Leah and sat on our balcony, the city rumbling below. She held me, without words. That silence was a kind of grace. Months later, I would look back and see that the real work of healing was not about erasing the past. It was about learning to carry it without letting it bend every new moment into a replay. It was about noticing the difference between protecting a relationship and suffocating it. And it was about understanding that moral clarity often comes not from grand gestures, but from daily choices to be honest, present, and brave. Shadows and decisions. The weeks after Emma's final conversation hovered over me like a fog. Not oppressive, not suffocating, but persistent, a reminder that history isn't something you erase with a single gesture of honesty. I could have easily ignored it, stored it in a drawer labeled closed chapter, but the lessons it offered demanded attention. The key, I realized, wasn't to escape the past, but to navigate it. Leah and I settled into a more comfortable rhythm. Our conversations were deeper now, conversations where silence wasn't awkward and laughter wasn't obligatory. We shared our small victories and our anxieties without fear. Yet even in this comfort, I felt an undercurrent of tension, the awareness that life always tests patience and integrity in ways that are subtle yet decisive. The city, as ever, didn't pause. Chicago's streets were alive with the smell of roasted chestnuts in autumn, the chatter of people moving toward their destinations, the ever-present hum of life pressing forward. I tried to anchor myself in the present, reminding myself that love, trust, and patience are exercises as much as feelings. One evening, Leah suggested we attend a literary event at a small independent bookstore downtown. She was excited, talking about the author, her work, and the intimate atmosphere. I agreed, though with a measure of hesitation. Part of me still flinched at gatherings, a vestige of mistrust I had yet to fully unearth. At the bookstore, the author spoke about relationships, fidelity, and moral ambiguity. Every sentence seemed to echo the turbulence of my own life. A Q&A followed, and someone asked about forgiveness after betrayal. I caught Leah's glance. She squeezed my hand. My pulse quickened, and for a moment, I felt exposed. But I stayed, listening, absorbing the lessons that didn't need to be directly applied, yet were undeniably relevant. Walking home afterward, I reflected on how far I had come. The temptation to judge the past or to blame myself had lessened. Instead, I understood that growth involved both confrontation and acceptance. The streets were damp from an earlier rain. Reflections shimmered beneath street lamps like fragments of memory I could observe without sinking into them. Yet the equilibrium was fragile. At work, a new project placed me alongside Jessica, a brilliant, ambitious colleague. Our collaboration was strictly professional, but her intensity sparked old patterns. I noticed myself analyzing her words and gestures, moments of admiration tinged with unwarranted suspicion. Awareness, I reminded myself, is the first step in addressing latent tendencies. I spoke to Leah honestly about the discomfort, about the fleeting emotions I felt that I knew were unhelpful. Her response was patient. Naming it doesn't make it real. It just makes it manageable. I also reflected on my own reactions to Leah's friends. Lila was still in our orbit, unpredictable, magnetic. At first, every encounter made me tense, but gradually, I recognized her presence as a reminder of my own insecurities rather than a threat to our relationship. Leah's consistent support and clear boundaries allowed me to face these insecurities without projecting them onto her or others. The test, however, came in an unexpected form. Leah received a work opportunity abroad for 6 weeks. It was prestigious, a career milestone she had long desired. Rationally, I was proud, but emotionally, I wrestled with anxiety and latent fear. Part of me wanted to tether her to me. Part of me recognized that love cannot be a cage. I grappled with these feelings for days, writing in my journal, walking the riverside, reflecting on patterns of jealousy and control. When she returned late one evening, exhausted from travel, I greeted her with warmth, not interrogation. The shift in my approach was subtle but significant. I was beginning to live in trust rather than fear. During those weeks, I also revisited therapy sessions. Dr. Patel helped me confront the deeper roots of my mistrust and moral ambiguity. We discussed boundaries, the difference between instinctive fear and rational judgment, and the slow work of reconciling past trauma with present choices. Each session reinforced that morality is exercised in decisions small and large, in honesty and restraint, in the willingness to observe the self without judgment. Leah and I began planning a weekend getaway to Milwaukee. It was spontaneous, a chance to step out of routine and focus on each other. We explored the streets, museums, and riverfronts, sharing quiet conversations over coffee and pastries. It was not dramatic. There were no life-altering declarations, just a steady cultivation of intimacy, respect, and shared joy. One evening, on the balcony of our rented apartment, the lights of the city below glittered like distant constellations. Leah leaned against me, her presence a grounding force. "Do you ever feel haunted?" she asked softly. I considered the question. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I'm learning to live with the ghosts rather than letting them control me." She nodded. "That's all anyone can do. Accept, reflect, choose." In that moment, I understood the moral tension that had guided much of my recent life. Growth and love are not about avoiding discomfort or erasing past pain. They are about conscious navigation, patience, and willingness to confront both our shadows and our desires. By the end of the trip, I felt a renewed sense of agency. My relationship with Leah was not a product of chance. It was the result of deliberate choices, hard work, and a willingness to face emotional ambiguity. I had learned that trust is built incrementally, tested subtly, and strengthened through vulnerability and consistency. Returning to Chicago, the city seemed different. The streets, the river, the lights, they were familiar, but I felt a new alignment with them, as if my own internal order had shifted slightly. Leah and I continued to navigate our lives with the awareness that the past could inform us, but would not define us. And yet, life promised further challenges. The past occasionally surfaced, new people arrived, temptations persisted, and my own insecurities remained present. But I had a framework now: honesty, reflection, patience, and deliberate choice. I had begun to see that the moral fabric of a relationship is woven not in singular moments of crisis, but in countless small acts of integrity, empathy, and conscious engagement. I wrote in my journal that night, "The heart carries shadows, but the hand can choose light." Every choice is an act of morality. Every decision a step toward who I want to be. Leah read over my shoulder, her hand brushing mine. She smiled softly, not with relief, not with judgment, but with shared understanding. And for the first time in a long time, I felt both the weight of the past and the lightness of possibility coexisting, guiding me forward. Temptation and clarity. The transition from autumn to winter brought both a chill to the city and a subtle tension to our relationship. Chicago's streets glistened with frost, holiday lights reflected on wet pavements, and the ever-present hum of the city felt sharper, more insistent. For Leah and me, life had settled into a rhythm, but the undercurrent of uncertainty remained, as if every day contained a quiet test of patience, trust, and moral courage. Work had become more demanding. A high-stakes project demanded long hours, collaboration with multiple teams, and meticulous attention to deadlines. Among my colleagues was someone new, Claire, a dynamic and perceptive woman whose intelligence was both intimidating and compelling. Our professional relationship remained strictly work-related, yet I noticed subtle sparks of admiration and curiosity emerging within myself. I caught myself analyzing her gestures, the inflections in her voice, and moments of spontaneous laughter. Awareness alone became the first tool in managing a potential emotional entanglement. One evening, after a long day, Claire suggested we grab a celebratory drink. The tone was friendly, but the offer felt loaded with possibility. I felt a tight knot form in my chest, not out of desire for Claire, but out of recognition of my vulnerability. I knew the consequences of acting impulsively. I paused, considered the choice carefully, and replied politely but firmly, "I'm committed to being present in my personal life tonight. Perhaps another time." The conscious acknowledgement of temptation, rather than avoidance or denial, became an important lesson. I shared this moment with Leah later that evening. Claire invited me for drinks. I confessed. I declined, but it made me realize how easily the mind can wander. Leah listened, her expression calm but attentive. "Recognition is key," she said. "You didn't act on it, but by acknowledging it, you understand yourself better. That's how trust is reinforced, with honesty and self-awareness." That same week, we faced another test. A close friend of Leah's, Daniel, visited from out of town. His energy was magnetic and unpredictable. During the first dinner, he teased me about the seriousness of our relationship, playfully suggesting that Leah deserved someone more exciting. My initial reaction was defensiveness. The familiar itch of jealousy surfaced, quick and insistent. But I recognized it immediately. I chose to respond with composure, engaging in light banter without allowing my insecurities to dictate my tone or actions. Walking home after Daniel's visit, I reflected on the nature of trust. It is not simply the absence of infidelity or betrayal. It is the capacity to remain steadfast in the face of provocation, doubt, and the inevitable uncertainties of human interaction. I realized that I could not control Leah, nor could she control me. Our integrity was exercised in the way we chose to navigate these interactions and maintain clarity of intention. Meanwhile, personal reflection continued to play a crucial role in my growth. I maintained therapy sessions with Dr. Patel, where we explored deeper patterns of jealousy, self-doubt, and past relational trauma. Each session reinforced the understanding that morality and trust are cultivated through repeated, intentional choices rather than singular acts of heroism or contrition. The holidays approached, and with them came social gatherings, parties, and the perpetual temptation to compare ourselves to others. We attended Leah's office party, a bustling event with colleagues, laughter, and subtle social maneuvering. I noticed my instincts react to subtle cues, the flirtatious glance of an acquaintance, the shared laughter between Leah and someone else. Yet, instead of reacting impulsively, I paused, named my feelings, and allowed them to pass without judgment. This conscious mindfulness became a recurring practice, reinforcing both my personal growth and the stability of our relationship. One particularly cold December evening, Leah and I visited a small cafe near the river. We sat by the window, watching the reflection of streetlights ripple across the icy water. We spoke about our year, our challenges, and our growth. For the first time, I realized how much our relationship had matured. We were no longer defined solely by our past scars, but by the choices we made to navigate life together with integrity. However, life's tests continued to emerge unexpectedly. Emma reached out again via email, requesting a brief meeting. My pulse quickened, but this time, my response was measured. I informed her that I had moved forward, that Leah was my partner, and that I did not wish to reopen old wounds. It was a decisive action, rooted in self-respect, awareness, and ethical clarity. Leah, when informed, responded with quiet confidence. She understood the importance of boundaries and the need for mutual respect. Her trust was evident, and in turn, it reinforced my own confidence in our bond. We spent the remainder of the evening discussing future plans, the upcoming year, and small adventures we could share. The winter months provided opportunities for reflection. Long walks along Lake Michigan, quiet evenings by the fireplace, and thoughtful conversations solidified our mutual understanding. I began to recognize that love, in its most resilient form, is an active choice, not a passive state. It requires continuous effort, self-awareness, and a commitment to navigate moral ambiguity without succumbing to fear or jealousy. By the end of Part 6, I understood that personal growth is iterative. Every test, temptation, and challenge contributes to a deeper understanding of oneself and one's capacity for trust. Leah and I had moved beyond mere survival of the past, cultivating a relationship defined by intentionality, communication, and ethical engagement. Tests of the heart. Winter slowly gave way to early spring, though in Chicago, the transition was subtle. The frost lingered in corners, and the river reflected the pale sunlight with a sharp glint. Leah and I had settled into a routine that felt comfortable, yet the city's restless energy reminded me that life rarely remains static. Our relationship had matured, but I was aware that emotional growth is never complete. It is continuously tested by time, circumstance, and internal fears. One afternoon, I received an invitation from a former college friend, Thomas, who had recently moved to New York. He wanted to meet for a business-casual networking event in the city. The invitation was innocent enough, but old patterns stirred within me. I felt a flicker of apprehension, a blend of jealousy, insecurity, and the vague memory of my own past mistakes. Leah noticed the hesitation and asked if I wanted to discuss it. I trust you, she said, but I also want to understand what's going through your mind. I explained my concerns, admitting the self-doubt and residual fear of repeating past relational missteps. Leah listened patiently, offering insight without judgment. Her presence was a stabilizing force, reminding me that trust is nurtured through honesty, reflection, and deliberate action. I decided to attend the event. The networking gathering was lively, a mixture of colleagues, friends, and acquaintances. Thomas introduced me to several people, including a charismatic woman named Elise. Our interaction was friendly and professional, yet I noticed the subtle thrill of social recognition stir within me. It was a familiar sensation, admiration, intrigue, but this time I recognized it for what it was, a natural human response that did not necessitate action or betrayal. Throughout the evening, I consciously managed my reactions. I remained present, engaged with Elise and others respectfully, and maintained mental boundaries. Each choice reinforced my capacity to navigate complex social dynamics without compromising my relationship with Leah. Returning home, I shared the evening's events with Leah. She asked about Elise, not with suspicion, but with curiosity about my own responses and reflections. I described the interactions, emphasizing the importance of recognizing internal impulses without acting on them. Leah nodded, reinforcing the value of self-awareness and deliberate emotional management. The weeks that followed involved continued personal and relational growth. Leah and I explored new parts of the city, visited art exhibits, and engaged in thoughtful conversations about our aspirations, fears, and ethical frameworks. Each shared experience deepened our connection, while simultaneously highlighting the importance of maintaining individual integrity within a partnership. Unexpectedly, Emma resurfaced in my professional orbit. She was collaborating on a project unrelated to our past, but her presence reawakened dormant emotional patterns. I experienced fleeting discomfort and unresolved tension, a reminder that healing is ongoing and requires vigilance. Instead of avoidance, I chose conscious engagement, acknowledging the emotional response internally, reaffirming boundaries, and maintaining professional decorum. Leah's consistent support allowed me to process these encounters without projecting anxiety or mistrust onto her or the situation. Our communication emphasized transparency and empathy, enabling me to confront residual fears rather than suppress them. This process underscored the distinction between vulnerability and weakness. Facing difficult emotions with honesty fortifies relationships rather than undermines them. As spring progressed, Leah and I planned a weekend retreat to a cabin outside the city. The trip offered an opportunity to cultivate intimacy, self-reflection, and mutual support in a setting removed from everyday distractions. We hiked through wooded trails, discussed our personal and professional goals, and shared quiet evenings by the fireplace. These moments reinforced the understanding that love and trust are active practices, requiring deliberate effort and attention. During one reflective evening, Leah asked, "Do you ever worry that the past will define us?" I considered her question carefully. Sometimes, I admitted, but I've learned that it doesn't have to. The past informs us, but it doesn't control us. She smiled gently, acknowledging the truth of the statement. Her perspective reminded me that relationships flourish when individuals take responsibility for their emotional landscapes and commit to conscious growth. Challenges persisted, naturally. Unexpected work demands, social interactions, and internal insecurities continued to test my patience and moral clarity. Yet each trial offered opportunities to strengthen trust, exercise honesty, and reaffirm commitment. I began to appreciate that enduring love is less about perfection and more about navigating complexity with empathy, integrity, and conscious decision-making. Towards the end of Part 7, I reflected on the cumulative lessons of these months: acknowledgement of internal impulses, management of temptation, open communication, and deliberate action. These principles had become the pillars of my evolving moral and relational framework, guiding interactions with Leah, colleagues, friends, and the remnants of my past. By consciously observing patterns of thought and behavior, responding rather than reacting, and maintaining transparency, I discovered that trust and intimacy are cultivated incrementally. Each choice, each acknowledgement, each act of honesty reinforced the foundation of a relationship capable of weathering ambiguity, external pressures, and the inevitable shadows of human desire. Turbulence and revelation. By early summer, the city had taken on a new hue, one that reflected warmth but also the intensity of life in motion. Chicago's streets pulsed with activity, from street performers to tourists, to the hurried rhythm of everyday commuters. Leah and I had settled into a stable routine, yet we both understood that comfort is often a precursor to testing, a quiet signal that life is about to challenge stability in subtle, unexpected ways. The spring had brought professional success, but also increased responsibility. A high-profile client required my full attention, in collaboration with new team members, including a perceptive and assertive woman named Celia, introduced both opportunity and internal tension. While our interactions remained strictly professional, I noticed an increasing awareness of my responses to her presence. Her confidence and charm triggered old patterns of curiosity, admiration, and latent temptation. Recognizing these responses, I consciously managed my behavior, maintaining professional integrity while observing my own emotional landscape. Leah's career was simultaneously advancing. She was leading a major campaign that demanded travel, long hours, and high-pressure decisions. With each trip, I confronted residual feelings of jealousy and insecurity, tempered by the awareness that these impulses are normal but must not dictate action. I chose to communicate openly about my fears, recognizing that transparency fosters trust and strengthens bonds rather than undermines them. One evening, as we prepared for a weekend away from the city, Leah mentioned a social gathering with colleagues that she was attending during the trip. My initial response was tension, but I paused, considered the situation, and chose openness over suspicion. "I trust you," I said, "but I want to be honest about my apprehension. It's not about you, it's about my own insecurities." She smiled, understanding and patient. "We can face it together," she replied. Acknowledgement is the first step to managing it. This shared approach became a guiding principle in our relationship, to confront internal turbulence consciously and collaboratively, without projecting fears onto the other person. During our weekend away, we found ourselves hiking through forested trails, the canopy filtering sunlight in shifting patterns. We discussed the past months, the challenges faced, and the lessons learned. I reflected on my encounters with Celia and my management of lingering feelings for Emma. Leah shared her own insights about professional boundaries, interpersonal dynamics, and the importance of mutual respect in sustaining a partnership amidst external pressures. The conversations were candid, layered, and rich with nuance, revealing the complexity of moral and emotional growth. Returning to the city, new challenges emerged. A minor misunderstanding with a colleague at work triggered latent self-doubt, but I recognized the pattern early, allowing me to approach the situation with measured communication rather than reactive defensiveness. Leah and I debriefed regularly, discussing not only external events, but also the internal responses they provoked. This practice strengthened our relational resilience and reinforced the principle that morality and integrity are cultivated through conscious reflection and deliberate action. Summer brought social engagements, professional obligations, and subtle emotional tests. Leah's colleagues included both friendly and ambitious individuals whose presence could inadvertently provoke insecurity or tension. Each interaction became an opportunity to practice awareness, to distinguish between perception and reality, and to respond with integrity rather than reaction. I maintained mindfulness practices learned in therapy, journaling my thoughts, and discussing insights with Leah to ensure alignment in values and emotional clarity.